Hey, what's up, CBR fam? We
Back
back at it
again.
again. Once again. How y'all been since last time we seen y'all?
I
You
hope
already
good,
drinking?
man. I hope y'all good out there. You know what I'm saying? I already cracked one open. You know what I'm saying?
What up, Bill? What up, Earls? What up, Lupe? Mike from 1776. What up,
Yeah,
Salamander?
Lupe.
Hey, Salamander, you gotta
Sure.
send me a message after this one. Oh, I gotta talk to you about
Tatum.
something.
John Jones,
Uh,
what's going on? Tuck. Hey,
Tuck
Cornelius.
Cornelius.
Tuck,
Hey, Tucky, tell me
Cornelius
about that.
Wester. Hey, shout out Cornelius, man. We had Cornelius up in the building. Adam
What
Sal up
up,
in this
Chris?
thing.
What up, Chris?
What
Our
up,
sponsor, Chris from Innerbox
Bill?
3D. We got the banner up.
Yeah,
What up,
Mikey Martin,
Noel?
Jordan Hicks.
Jordan, fucking crazy
Shout out
old
that
man
boy
ass Bill.
Cornelius. That boy Cornelius up in here. What up, Tyler
Mikey
Willis?
Marsh. Who else we got? I
Hey,
think
shout out
that's
to
it.
our sponsor
Kyle.
for a minute, by the way,
We got
man.
Tyler
For,
and we got Kyle M. Go ahead, bro.
yeah, shout out to our sponsor. I just wanted to give our sponsor some love real quick. That's all. You know.
We love you, Chris,
What up,
bro.
Ruben?
Yeah, don't be falling down those steps, bro. You gotta keep it
Yeah,
safe,
but
dog.
if you do
What up,
keep us in your
Ruben?
ear, keep us in yeah, we will
Hey,
escort you to the hospital room, the ER,
what's
baby.
up? We got Andy Middleton in the house. And Dimitri.
Yeah,
How you
Andy up
doing,
in here.
Andy Middleton?
Oh
Andy
snap,
Middleton
Andy.
is in the house, bro. Andy Middleton is here.
That's my
Um,
dog. Andy Middleton, my dog.
all right, bro. You got anything you want to go over?
Me this week, man. Nothing, man. Everything is beautiful in the week, in the conjo world out here in these conjo streets. Everything is
Screets?
good. And yeah, in these
Scr-
streets.
sprinkling
Um,
these contra screets?
yeah. Um, man, we got a banger tonight, man. This is gonna be one of them. This is gonna be one of them episodes where you're gonna be able to sit back and put your feet up. And this is gonna be one of the episodes that for the grown people who had a rough week, you're gonna be able to sit back and get some knowledge. For the people who are working that graveyard shift, you need something to kill a couple of hours. Uh, you didn't just put the kids down, and you like, damn, the kids gonna sleep. Ooh, we here for you. You know what I'm saying? Get a drink or something. You smoke and grab that, whatever you need. We got a banger tonight, man. Somebody I consider OG, and OG to me, as I told him, um, I don't really care about how nice the animals you selling these days, man. It's about to me the OG is if you was around in the MBF days, to me, you got skins on the wall, and I guess tonight's got that for sure, man. I remember back then, I had to sip to that. But no, man, it's gonna be a banger tonight, man. I'm just happy to be here, happy to be around my people again, seeing so much love in the chat. You know, how was Arlington, by the way, man? Y'all, you was what? You was Sal's butler for the weekend. You showed him around. You showed him around to Texas. Showing him what the
Bro,
USA was like. How was
I
that?
did, man. Hey, man, shout out to my brother Sal. We had a good time. And shout out to everybody that, was actually really just open and, just cool because they made it. Like, Alum, I don't know where Alum Ass is, but Alum was a big part of it. Bill Stiegel, Pat, um, who else we had? Mark Hager. We had the two
Yeah,
Bash
I definitely
Bros.
saw the pictures. I saw the pictures, man. Looked like y'all had a good ass time.
Yeah, bro, we had the Houston Bash Bros. We had Lupe and Ruben. Bill Hoffman, man. Man, shout out to my dog, Bill Hoffman, aka the squirrel with alopecia. Who else do we have? I feel like I'm gonna forget somebody, they don't get mad. Um, but yeah,
What up,
it
Mike?
was a good time. It was a really good time. And shout out to all of Texas, man.
Lupe, I
Um,
was in Chicago you know,
What up, DD?
I was gonna come to spring, but Travis told me that Bill Stiegel might not have nothing in the spring, and I ain't coming to Texas without coming to the Stiegel compound because he personally invited me, so I got to pull up. So we're gonna see. Next year I'm gonna be in Texas for sure. I'm gonna be in the Lone Star State, in the Kraken. You know what I'm saying, with my star because I am a star. I'm just playing.
Shut your ass up. Shut your ass up, bro. I'm a star. Who you think you are? Jeremiah? You think you Jeremiah?
Somebody laugh. I got a chopper in the car.
we
Got a chopper in the car.
not doing that today.
Got a chopper in the car.
Waiting on them to put me and Lupe on NGL. What is NGL? I don't know what that means.
DD. What's up, DD?
Anyway.
Oh, I'm not gonna lie. Waiting on them to put me and Lupe on. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, okay. Y'all gonna bring your asses. Y'all gonna bring your asses on this show eventually. Both y'all fucking Houston Bash Bros. They was I love them two dudes. But anyway, man, we gonna get to our most esteemed guest of the night.
For sure.
Mr. John Irby from Mid Atlantic Arboreals. We're gonna bring him in right now.
Yes, sir.
How you doing, John?
Hey everybody, how y'all doing?
He just put his hand up. That was funny.
How's everybody doing?
We're good.
What's up, John?
Everybody's good tonight.
Thanks for
We're glad that you made it.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Before we start asking you questions about chondros, I gotta ask you one question, John. What's up with this Gila monster?
Oh,
what's up with the Gila monster?
Well, I got a group of Gila monsters. I've got 7 of them, and that's just kind of a side project that I got started a handful of years ago. I'm going to cool them down and try to breed them this. Well, it's pretty cool. You have to brumate them. So you cycle them, but different than chondros, and you cool them down to like 50 degrees and like put them to sleep almost. And then you wake them up in the spring, and then you breed them and you get eggs over the summer. So it's
how long are they in brumation?
3 months. You put them down about December 1st and you pull them out like March 1st. You put them in either a refrigerator, or if you've got, conditions that can get cold enough, but they've got to get down to like 55 degrees and stay there.
So you put them in the refrigerator for 3 months and just leave them alone.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to use a thermostat because a fridge gets down. A house fridge gets down to like 40 degrees, so you got to use a thermostat to prevent it from going too cold. But yeah, you put them in a fridge on a thermostat and lock them down for 3 months.
And there's no eating and nothing the whole time?
No eating, no nothing. Yeah, so I've never done it before, so I'm excited about it.
Okay. But what's the sex ratio you work? What's the sex ratio you working with?
I got to sex them. My buddy Chad Holker, I think y'all maybe even had him on the show. I don't know. Anyway, he's a ball python guy.
No, probably not.
And he's got some chondros too from me that we produced together with a female of his. But anyway, he's got an ultrasound, and we're going to ultrasound them in the next few weeks, so I know how to pair them in the spring. Yeah, you ultrasound them to figure out the sex and stuff. It's pretty cool. Okay. And then the eggs, they take like 180 or 200 days to hatch.
Damn.
Yeah, so
you
cool them down in December. You pull them out in March. You breed them. They lay in the summer, and then the babies hatch in October or November. So it's a process I've never gone through before. So I look forward to trying to crack the code, figure it
I
out.
remember when you a couple years ago you was just buying them and like building up your group.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Bill Hoffman says that I met Chad. I don't necessarily remember. I met so many people, but that's what Bill Hoffman says. He also says, "Hello, John."
Yeah, see, I'm kind of got the comments going here. Yeah, I can't. I thought y'all had Chad on, but maybe not.
I don't know. We haven't had Chad on.
Maybe he was on a different show. Something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did he got an alias? Because we had a few streaming pillars on him, but we don't know if they had different aliases or something.
Yo, don't listen to this.
Nah. Maybe not. Since y'all are like Chondro specific here, maybe he was on a different show.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But shout out to Chad though.
We did meet him. We did meet Chad. All right, so let's get started with the basics, John, because I don't know how many people here know much about you. But could you tell us about your history with reptiles and when you eventually got to chondros, the year, and how you got into it?
Yeah, sure. So I've liked snakes and since I can remember, since I was like 4 or 5 years old, and my mom wasn't really into that kind of thing. And so back in the day, it was like, there used to be pet shops that were cool. There isn't really anymore. I mean, there's PetSmart, and it got kind of turned into the Walmart of pet shops. But there used to be like reptile shops and stuff like that. And so my parents, in order to kind of appease my interest, would take me there and let me see snakes and hold them, and it would kind of satisfy me. And I also found them outside in the wild and stuff like that. And then sometime along the lines when I was in my teens, I kind of realized that I could start keeping snakes. And my mom and dad got a divorce, and my dad was a lot more lax than my mom. And my mom's super chill now. It's, so many years have passed that even she's warmed up to it, but it was just kind of foreign to her back in those days. And, but anyway, when they got a divorce, I was living with my dad, and I realized I could start keeping snakes. So I started keeping snakes, and it was very quickly. Chondros were always a really big interest of mine. I used to, like, when I was like 14 or 15, I'd sit on the internet and look at Greg Maxwell's website and just drool over these chondros. And so I got a ball python, and I kept it for a few months, and then I got a carpet python and kept it for a few months, and then I got a chondro very shortly after that. So my third snake was a chondro, and I kept it for a while. Actually, that snake didn't feed for me. And I actually, without ever having bought from him before, I emailed Greg Maxwell. I mean, in those days, he was in like the mid 2000s. He was like the source of all of the knowledge. I mean, there were other people that knew their stuff, but Greg had a kind of a pretty substantial website, and he was easy to find on the internet. And so he had a pretty large presence, and was an authority figure in green tree pythons. And so I emailed him, and without even having bought anything from him, he helped me get that snake feeding and everything. I started to expand my collection from there, and of course because of that, I hold Greg in a pretty high regard, and I ended up buying snakes from Greg, and those snakes are long gone, and a whole new generation, a whole new chapter of snakes are around now. But yeah, that was the beginning of my chondro love affair, I guess.
Yeah, we had Greg on, and Greg definitely took us back.
Yeah,
I got to ask him a lot of stuff too, man. That was pretty surreal. I ain't gonna lie.
Shout out to Mr. Maxwell.
Yeah.
Greg,
your first chondro, what was it? Where you get it from?
It was a pet shop Biak. It was a yellow neonate pet shop Biak. Okay. And just textbook story that you see a lot of people going through still to this day. They go and, I mean, it was, when you haven't had a chondro before and you see like a yellow or a red neonate chondro in a pet shop, I mean, and they're a few $100s.
It's striking, and it's like it's very tempting too.
Yeah, it's accessible. You're like, man, I mean, if you've only had like $100 snakes, you're like, man, that's a little out of reach. That's kind of crazy. But that thing is spectacular. I mean, it's just they're and I still believe that to this day that, baby chondros are pretty magical. I mean, they're just special, man. They just really are. And they always will be, no matter how many you ever have. Baby chondro is a pretty special little snake.
Yeah. So that brings me to my next question. So, after you got the first Biak, it's like a 3-part question. How were you acquiring chondros? What was likely available to you at that time? And what was like the ratio of imports to captive bred in the market at that point in time, if you can remember?
Well, it was essentially just like it is now. There were lots of imports available, but there were people like Greg and people on the MVF that were really starting to speak out against buying these beat up sick snakes. There are some pretty good imports, and I have bought imports since, but captive bred stuff was really starting to be pushed and popularized and become more and more available. And the availability in some ways kind of matched the size of the hobby at that time. It's blown up much bigger than it was at that time. And so, there were people like Trooper Walsh and Rico Walder and Greg Maxwell and Terry Phillip and a few other people, that were Greg Stevens and John Holland and all these people that were producing them. And so after that first experience, and it was a little bit of a rough one, even though I got that animal to live eventually.
I remember Jurgen Van Spurgeon. I remember him too.
Yeah, Jurgen. Yeah. I've started buying captive bred stuff pretty quickly after that. And so they were available. And now the bloodlines are more developed and more advanced than they were. But, there were blue line snakes back then and high yellow bloodlines and calico bloodlines and things like that.
It was so much cheaper, though. It was so much cheaper. It was like yellow neos from Lineage animals for like $600. Red neos was like $1,200, and I was looking at the time like, who in the hell would pay $1,200 for a snake? That's ridiculous.
Yeah. There used to be high yellow bloodlines that were $700, $800, $900, $1,200.
Yep.
And they're probably 2 or 3, 4 times that now.
Yeah,
especially from the really, really exceptional stuff.
Yeah, it exploded. That was crazy to see. The import too.
And then blue line and calico stuff. I mean, the chondros have always held value. Now they have gone through a recent, really significant spike in price, especially some people are really have pushed the envelope on price, but they've never gone down in value. The market has never.
AKA robbing people.
Some people have charged probably a little bit more than they ought to have, but that's on them. I guess you could say the market bears what the market bears, but some of the snakes that have been sold are not from bloodlines that I believe really warrant those world-class prices. I mean, when you tip into $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 for a neonate chondro, those should be from the most world-class pairings and on the planet. And I think people have kind of stretched that a little bit, but
not world class, not just in phenotype too. I'm talking about like the genetic profile of them, like it's solid, dating back to what they stand for.
Yeah, with a demonstrated ability to reproduce the phenotype again into the next generation with some level of consistency.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question.
Only people doing that right now is you and Dave D consistently.
Yeah, and Christian Stewart, and there are a few
Christian
others.
Stewart too. Yeah, you're right, Christian Stewart. But I'm talking about like consistently seeing blue snakes as what they presented as and what their background stand with. This is just you and VV.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Oh, so no problem at all.
And there are some others. I mean, they're like, I want to give, if you don't, he's not as
Frank too. You know what, Frank? I gotta give Frank some love too.
Pointed out, like people like Frank and people like Tommy Budway, and
you're right.
They are
Tommy Budway too. Yep, my bad.
They might not be as loudmouthed as me on the scene. So they kind of fly a little more under the radar sometimes, but they have very high quality animals. And
Frank doing this thing for sure.
Yeah, they got top shelf stuff for sure.
So that brings me to my next question about the types of animals that were available, and I understand the animals were bigger then, and they're probably being sold smaller now. But have you seen an overall change in actual quality of the animals as far as imports and designers that you may have gotten over the years?
Well, what do you mean by quality? Are you talking about
just size and animals,
or health?
Just the health of the animal.
Yeah, there probably has been. I think that I'll just take the blue line for example, and it could be said about a lot of different bloodlines, but in the early days when there were so few of these snakes around and people wanted to produce more of them, the gene pool was smaller. And so you saw things like people doing, you did Mr. Blue back to his mom because Mr. Blue was a fluke and he was bright blue. And so what else do you do? And this is not to knock any of these guys. I'm really good friends with Tim Morris and all that. But when you get a blue snake like Mr. Blue, you think like, well, I want to concentrate that blood. So you do things like back to his mom and back to his aunt and all of that stuff. Now, that's not to say we're not doing similar stuff to that now, but I think things were bred really tight. And like the lemons, they were like sib to sib and sib to sib kind of over and over. And you start to, who knows if it was a combination of the times and what we knew then and incubation challenges, that may have been mistaken as like inbreeding depression, or maybe it was a combination of a little bit of inbreeding, a little bit of early days of figuring out the system and how to breed these things. And that made for, some of these lines kind of got dwindled down and there weren't very many representatives of them.
Especially the lemon tree that you mentioned.
Oh yeah,
that was my favorite.
It's essentially gone.
Yeah, it's basically gone.
Yeah, certainly of any kind of line bred, like working toward making like lemons. It's in blood. It's in like all the dream lemon stuff, and therefore in a lot of the calico stuff. But there isn't anyone like working the lemon line. They're just gone.
Yeah, the percentage is very low, and and it's probably those two things, but it's also that the locality animals were so poo-pooed and like shit, for lack of a better word, shit upon them that it wasn't as much emphasis to outcross to say like how we do now or how you do now, where let's outcross this to a BI. Or let's outcross this to X and then keep refreshing, new wild caught blood in that. Given that shit, all of these bloodlines came from wild caught anyway. I think it was just kind of like hurt the blood type too, to add some on to that.
Yeah, and then you had like with the case of the blue line, you had people like Rico and you had Christian Stewart and some of these people that, even though it caused a step back, you know what I mean? But to take, you know, a blue snake and breed it to an outcross snake and stretch that blood out a little bit, you know, and play the long game where you outcross that one and outcross that one and then cross the offspring together and things like that. That's when we started to see things like larger clutch sizes and a little momentum get go. And if you think about it, there's a few clutches out there that really kind of were some of the turning points, like Rico's blue 05188 clutch, the Mr. Blue Carolina to PNG, and then his Blue Max Jarvis clutch, and then breeding those together. And some of those clutches put 20 something animals on the ground, and then those get into the right hands, and then those get bred correctly. And the next thing you know, that's why there's so much of that Blue Max Jarvis 05188 blood out there. And that's why
it's a lot of Blue Max Jarvis, and then Mr. Blue Carolina too.
And a lot of Mr. Blue Carolina blood. You know, that was a successful clutch that got a few stud males got into the right hands, and then Christian Stewart did his work with Blue Deuce and Crazy and stuff like that. So that really, and then Dave D and myself and, you know, a few other people got a hold of it and, you know, really had a lot of success. And, you know, and Dave pulled together as some of these collections wound down, like when Brad Johnson of Brass Jungle Arboreal started to wind down and Rico started to wind down his collection. Dave was able to pull together some of those adults instead of those things getting splintered and scattered all around. You know, he was able to pull together under one roof some of the finest animals in the world, and really then, you know, you started to see, you know, some steps forward, and Christian as well, and that's not to knock people like anybody else, like Tommy and Rich Culver and Frank and all, you know, a lot of people acquired snakes from Rico and Brad, and, you know, and were able to consolidate those snakes and get them into one roof, get them settled, and really save the bloodline. And now the blue line is just, it's as big and as strong as it's ever been. And I'm real proud to be a part of it. In my opinion, I think the Green Tree Python, the domestic Trooper Walsh blue line, is probably the most complex, well-documented bloodline of any captive bred reptile in the world. I mean, maybe they've documented at zoos like the lineage of Komodo dragons or something like that on a zoological kind of level. But
I get what you're saying.
The carpet guys, the ball python guys, none of them. Nothing's got it on green tree pythons in general. And then the blue line in particular is just the king of them all as far as being well documented and line bred for, at this point, 50 years. It's a crown jewel of it's especially when you take into account that it was this massive community of people that like coordinated and came together, you know, and just kind of, it's a masterpiece of a captive breeding success story, in my opinion. It's pretty cool.
No, I agree. When you look at so many lineages, like myself, and you look back and you see a lot of them damn same names, you like, oh, damn, here it is again. Here it is again. Here it is again. Tim Moore's blue female. There it is again. There it is again. It's like you start to really appreciate what really, you know, the potency of what was going on back then. And shit, people really had to get their hands on that stuff.
Yeah, some of those things. And then now the new resurgence, in my opinion, is the Calico line is making a tremendous comeback again. You know, and it's like crazy when you think about these things get funneled down, and sometimes they're saved by a few animals. Like Dave got got a few,
Yeah.
and landed a few clutches. Christian had his male Velvet, and he got a hold of October from that was Maxwell's, and landed. And if that snake had gone in the wrong direction and died, and Christian, that would have been the end of that. And then Eddie Appel, he's got some stuff out of his stuff, but when you really soak that up,
TSK still working with some stuff too.
The splash animal, and you're like, holy shit! It came down to like 4 or 5 people that got a hold of a male, like Splash and October and this one and that one, and landed a few clutches. And now that can all start to get woven and rebuilt. And and so anyway, and then now the Calico line looks to be secure and safe again, but it was down to barely any left.
Rod Love too.
Rod.
He think he real slick. He low key. I be watching him.
Yeah, Rod's my boy.
He got some stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, he's my boy. And he landed a Calico clutch. And then it becomes really apparent. You're like, wow, especially with some of these special lines, each clutch is just so critical to, and 10 babies can then turn into 5 or 10 more clutches, and it can just, it can turn it around. You land a few clutches, and the next thing you know, the line is back, and there are real phenotype, real deal calicos on the scene again, and that's really cool.
I mean, right now, a lot of times what we see is you see a few people with, when I first came in like 8 years ago, like the number of calicos I've seen that look like calicos versus, nowadays where, you see calicos and you're just like, they don't look like the old calicos, but a few people have some of them that look like the old ones.
Yeah.
Now the real calicos got a weird neck. They always got a weird neck. It's like some orange stuff going on at the back of their neck right there.
Yeah, they do. They have that nice neck.
Yeah.
So let's get into husbandry. At that point in time, when you first started, as opposed to now, like what type of things were you doing then that you were doing now, and how much has it changed? And Keno will get into feeding after that.
Yeah, sure. So back in the day, man, I kept them just basically right out of the More Complete Chondro. That's how I started. I read the book and I kept them like that. And nowadays,
we was cooking them damn snakes, John.
Yeah. I still keep them a little
in glass exoteres.
Yeah. But now I probably keep them a combination of little tidbits that I've a little blend of Maxwell, a little blend of like stuff from Rico, and I keep them with some tips I got from Buddy Buscemi and Terry Phillip, and then a lot from Christian Stewart. Christian and I are really good friends, and we've really bounced a lot of ideas off each other and kind of formulated the way we keep them over the years. And so anyway, it's a blend of things, and I definitely kept them warmer back then. But I also kept them with a wider gradient. Like I kept them with a hotter hot spot, but a cooler cool end. And now I keep them with less gradient, and it's a little bit cooler on the basking spot, more like 84, 85, maybe probably 85. And then I keep them a little warmer on the cool spot, and they probably get up to about 82 during the day on the cool end of the cage, and they drop down to about 78 at night on the cool end of the cage. So there's really only a 2 or 3 degree difference, because the way I see it is a chondro spends the majority of its time in the ambient parts of the cage and only uses the warm spot of the cage intermittently to like do certain functions. So it gets over there to like digest food, or sometimes when it's in shed, or when it's cooking follicles. So whatever the hot spot is, that's not really all that important unless you saw that snake like hugging it a whole lot, and you're like, okay, it's not sufficient. But for the most part, what's the most important part of the cage is the rest of the cage, because that's where the chondro's living. That's where he's living the majority of his life. And he's only going over there. So it's like, well, when someone's like, I keep my chondros at 86, well, are they talking about the basking spot, the cool side, the thermostat setting? There's a whole lot that has to go into like understanding what they're talking about. And so when I'm talking about chondros, I shoot them with a temp gun. I shoot it from underneath the snake, so I'm not getting any radiant influence from the panel.
Right.
I just want the underside of the snake. These temperatures are measured, from that underside. And, during the day, I like to see the snake rise up to about 81 or 82 degrees in the ambient and drop down to about 78 degrees in the ambient. And I'm shooting for a daily average temperature of 80 degrees. And so that's kind of playing on that Terry Phillip method. He used to talk about keeping them at 80 and like keeping them real cool.
Yeah.
And so I am keeping them at a daily average temperature of 80 degrees. It's just I also believe that in the wild, they would experience some gentle rise in temp and some gentle fall in temp at night. And so I'm keeping them at a daily average temperature of 80 degrees, but I'm accomplishing it with a little bit of a swing in there.
And so did you start noticing that when you move your radiant heat panels to the middle of your cages?
And I do keep them in. I do also keep my radiant heat panels in the middle. I got that idea from Buddy Buscemi, who got that idea. Yeah, and if anybody out there is listening, Buddy Buscemi is just a pro. You know what I mean? If you just think about, there's people that have flashy websites and logos and all of that. Well, at the end of the day,
you tell Buddy to answer my damn message, because I messaged him a long ass time ago because I know he's smart.
Buddy should answer your message. But you're talking about people that have kept chondros for a long time and actually have the stats and the production behind them to back up what they say. He's one of those low key dudes that he's the real deal. You know what I mean? And so anyway, he got the idea from Terry Phillip, and as a way of keeping cages a little warmer in a cool basement. If you think about it, if the panel's in the middle and the cage is only like, it's not very far away. So the panel has a shorter distance to that wall and that wall. And so if you've got it in like a 65-degree room, if you've got the panel on one end, you're going to have a chilly end over here.
Yeah.
And if you've got that panel in the middle, it does that panel's kind of like within the cage a little more, in the center of the cage. And it helps that panel heat that cage better. And so Buddy was keeping snakes in a really chilly basement. And then he ended up liking it. And at the time I was keeping them in a little bit of a cooler basement, and I ended up really liking it. But then, back in the day, the Maxwell way of doing it was like a really warm, hot side and a really cool, cold side, like 78 over here and like 88 over there. And then people have started
he said he opened the door and dropped their ass down to 50 degrees.
Yeah, he'd open the window. But then people started keeping them so much cooler now, and like people keeping them like ambient. And so my method, if you think about it, is kind of a compromise between the two. It's kind of like a gentle ambient temp with a natural rise and fall on the cool side, with an access to a slightly warmer basking spot for accomplishing some functions, but they don't use it very often.
Hey, John, with this method, do you prefer a certain type of heat panel?
I only use Pro products.
Okay.
And I mean, I just can't, and I can't recommend them enough. I know people, and this is kind of what you get from having been around for a long time. I know people that have had Pro Products heat panels in continuous operation for over 20 years. The same panels, just trickling heat out reliably. There's just nothing more reliable. There's just, I don't know. I wouldn't use anything else. They're solid.
I don't know, having the Kino. I believe I've got one. The one thing I have against the pro products panels is that they're not sealed, and I think I have an irrational fear of water getting in there.
Yeah, don't worry about that. I mean, I'm not saying that it couldn't get in there. I'm just saying that, I've been keeping them a long time, and and then I just know other people that have also been keeping them a very long time, and even longer than I have, and that they've certainly never had any issue with it.
Yeah, I have one. I was using a lot of VEs, and they have this issue where if you have one in a cage with males like to mess with the plug, and no matter how you configure getting it stuck in there, the plug will still come out, and they burn. They kind of the plugs kind of burn, so I stopped using those.
Now, what kind
Um,
is that?
the Reptile Basics VE heat panels,
Yeah.
the ones for V. So I stopped using those. I got like two there in my garage right now that aren't being used, but I started using chicken brooder plates. Um, and they work pretty well.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Y'all hear me?
If you ever get on the phone with Bob Pound from Pro Products, he will explain to you he's very passionate about his panels, and he will explain to you all the science and all the technology behind what makes a good panel and why his are guaranteed to not catch on fire. And they're all, they're like the most thoroughly tested, safety rated, So, yeah, they won't have you won't have any issues with them.
Keno's back.
Yeah, I'm
All
sorry
right,
about that,
Keno,
y'all.
get
I
to
forgot to put
your
I
feeding
forgot to
questions.
I forgot to put my phone on airplane mode. So with that with your change how you did your pro panels, how did you how you do your females? How you prepare your females for breeding season?
That was one of my questions. You took my question.
Yes. It's been like 30 episodes. I finally stole one of yours. Yes.
What do you mean by like how do I feed them up to size, or how do I
Yeah.
cycle them, or
Yeah, both. How you
yeah?
do you feed them different in the summer between that and the winter? How you getting ready for your breeding season? Are you breeding throughout the year? Because I'll answer all that question.
Well, yeah, sure. So one thing I think is that
How old is the
chondros,
female? How old is the female? What's the youngest? Are you willing to breed that too?
Yeah, that was one of
well,
my questions as to like how do you
Yes.
choose
Two.
animals to breed.
Two. Yes.
As
sure,
far as size and age,
yeah. So some snakes are just slower growers, and they will need. I have bred 4-year-old females before, but they're um, more often a 5-year-old female is just a more sure bet. Um,
Okay.
you know, you got to push them pretty hard. You got to feed them pretty heavy to get them up to size any sooner than that. And so sometimes it's just by eye. It's by some snakes can just process food a little faster than others.
Mhm.
But some snakes, man, I mean, you just have to use common sense. If you fed the snake a handful of times and it hasn't defecated, like and you keep shoving food in there, I mean, you can damage them. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And really, sometimes they're a meal or two away from never being the same again. You know what I mean? Like if you are pushing on a snake and you slam that extra meal in there, they can get a little bloated, and it can throw their guts in like an unbalance, a disbalance, and they can be a little puffy, and basically kind of get that gut flora, those microbes and all that can be out of whack, and they basically be gassy, and you can mess them up, and so and then you can also they can develop, like they can start to tail hang and stuff like that, and if they ever start that habit, sometimes that's hard to break them of that. And then you're stuck leaning them back down and cutting all that weight off of them. And so you want to use some common sense and feed by eye. So anyway, I feed pretty large meals, and I also do believe, like, if you're thinking about a female and you're trying to breed her, you hear sometimes people talk about trying to get a few extra meals in her right before the breeding season. Chondros don't gain weight like that. You can't feed a snake 2 or 3 meals and it gain any appreciable amount of weight. They'll look fatter, but it's just fluids and poop in them. They need
It
to
comes
be,
off when it sheds.
yeah, it comes out when they shed and when they defecate. So
Yeah.
they need to be gaining that weight like in the season before or the lead up long time before. And so you can't be screwing around and missing the meals. You know what I mean? If you're and show up to breeding with an underweight female and hope to throw the weight on her in the last month. That's just not going to happen. And so I like to feed mine pretty steady, and I know which ones I'm going to breed the year before, you know what I mean? And so I'm prepping them the year before. And that way I can just, slow and steady get them there instead of trying to mad dash get them there right at the end.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a, people talk about overfeeding. What's overfeeding? Feeding them slow and steady a year in advance, or trying to slam it to them in the very end. And so I'm more about getting started early on it.
Yeah, something that Travis and I have talked about is, especially the first 2 years, it seems like that's really essential. Where
Yes,
it's kind of like, so it's like a few years ago, people was talking about how, man, don't overfeed, and it's like, well, if you had the intention of not breeding, I guess you could really kind of feed however you want. But if you're feeding this animal in the purposes of raising up for breeding, then those first 2 years where it's burning metabolism like crazy and just shitting all the time, urinating all the time, shedding every 3, 4, or 5 weeks on schedule. We've also talked about that. That's where we kind of feel like it's easy to, I guess, not power feed. That's probably a wrong word, but it's okay to play with your animals far size wise, especially when they get over a year.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Okay.
That's when you want to grow them. That's when they grow easily, and you can accomplish that without causing all those digestive issues. You do not want to show up with a 3-year-old or a 3.5-year-old and have this dream of breeding her next year, and she be like 250 grams.
Yeah.
It's just too big of a mountain to climb. And you want to, while they're young and growing fast, you'd rather go on and grow them at a pretty good clip. And then you can slow them down a little bit and kind of, mature them into that weight. And kind of, and again, I know that there's a whole camp of people out there that, that think chondros, are in the wild and they're like 500 or 600 grams for females, and that's fine. And I definitely don't think that there are chondros that are like 2,500 grams, but for a captive breeding situation, having a 700 or 800 gram female chondro is fine. It's going to give you a nice compromise between in clutch size, robust female, and it's also something that can be accomplished in a reasonable amount of time. And again, I fully agree that while those snakes are young and can grow is when they should grow.
Yep.
Do you utilize
the pendulum went way too far the other way. There was like this whole thing, and people were like, it had these like 300 gram females and stuff. I'm like, I mean, okay, but I think that people are wising up to that now, finally. Kind of coming on back to a little more centered approach.
Yeah. And that kind of.
So do you use any?
Go ahead,
Do you
Travis,
use
my
any
bad.
like system to like track their growth, or you just eyeball it in like
I
occasional
mostly
way?
just eyeball it. I do keep
Okay.
records. I've got nowadays. I'm using this app called Husbandry Pro, and I just use it to just see how often I'm feeding. But like Kino was talking about, when a snake is young, I don't want to say I'm not power feeding them. I'm not backing them up with food, but I am feeding them steady.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm almost looking for opportunities to feed them, meaning like when a snake defecates and cleans out, that's a great opportunity. And so on a female that
Yeah.
I'm trying to grow, I'm trying to sneak some meals in her. So I might be holding back, and I might have to wait weeks, for her to defecate. But when she does defecate, that might be an opportunity to feed a little larger meal than normal, and or slip one that's kind of like out of rotation on her. Just kind of hit her with an
Yep.
extra one or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And that actually kind of goes right into how you do your babies, because I kind of like how this is something that also me and Trav talked about again, where hurry up and getting them off mice. Hurry up getting them off mice. It was like
Pinkies.
pinky mice, hopper mice, whatever. Getting them on rats soon as possible when it's size appropriate. I want
Right.
you to kind of expand on that too, like what your milestone markers that you hope to achieve with your babies that you successfully had.
Well, I feed my adults rats. I don't feed them. I mean, I'll buy some mice if they're on sale. I mean, at
Me
the end
too.
of the day, the snake
He
is
said
all
stay on
good.
sale.
Yeah, I'll buy them. I'll feed a mix of stuff, but because at the end of the day, the snake's going to be all right on a mix of stuff.
True.
But the point I'm trying to make is I'm certainly not afraid of rats. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, unfortunately, just through the pandemic and the ball python market just blew up. The rat prices got expensive for a while there,
Yeah.
and the ball python guys, it's crazy how much they influence the market because ball pythons get stuck on meals. They won't switch back and forth as readily as chondros do. All my
Right.
stuff will eat rats, mice, whatever, but the
Yeah.
ball
Same.
python stuff sometimes can be a little food finicky and only want to eat a certain thing. And so that's why, because there's just such a larger ball python market, that's why things like jumbo mice and adult mice are much cheaper than the equivalent sized rat. Or at least that's one theory I've got, is because the ball python just puts such demand on the rat prices, on the rat supply.
Yeah. Jumbo
Um,
mice are always available. They're always available.
Yeah, and even though the ball python guys could feed them, they don't want to get a ball python stuck on mice because then they can't get them back on rats,
Yep.
and they need
Yep.
them on rats when they get big and need those big rats.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so I'll feed back and forth, but I like feeding rats if I can. And but the point of feeding is getting the animal on the most mature prey item possible for the prey item size that's appropriate for the snake size at that time. And so you start them on pinky mice just because that's the right thing to do. And then you want to feed them up through mice till about adult mice, because a hopper mouse or a small mouse is a more mature prey item than a fuzzy rat. He's got more fur, denser bones, more of a true skeleton, things like that, than a squishy little blob of a fuzzy rat. And so and he's not on milk anymore. So a fuzzy rat is still nursing from his mama. And so he's got milk in his, whereas a hopper mouse or a small mouse is a weaned item. He's eating food. And so he's more mature. So an equivalent sized mouse at that size is more mature than an equivalent sized rat. And therefore his organs are more mature and his skeleton's more mature and his fur is more developed and all of that. However, once you get to adult mice, when you go much beyond that, now you've got aging mice and these old retired breeders and stuff, and they're flabby and fatty. And switching to weaned rats now is kind of the along that same logic. Now you've got a young, robust prey item, and he's got a sturdy skeleton and sturdy fur on him and big organs that are fully developed and all of that, yet is still young and robust and vibrant and all of that, and is not old and decrepit and fatty and flabby. And so really I feed them from pinky mice up through it if I had my way and I could get them all in the sizes that I want at all times. I feed them from pinky mice up to adult mice and then switch from that to weaned rats. And I feed weaned rats and small rats to my adults.
Do you think that switching babies from, smaller prey items to larger, more mature prey items plays any part in animals having stronger skeletons, which avoid them from getting kinked?
I don't know about kinks. I think that as you get better as you start keeping chondros for a long time, you just don't have that kink thing anymore. It's almost like it's a learning curve or something. But like I don't have any snakes that ever have kinks, and maybe that's because of the way I'm feeding them. I don't know. So some of this is hard to test out. Right. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not doing a giant scientific study, but the logic makes sense. And some of that I picked up from Terry Phillip and other people that just, while again, they're not doing a scientific study, you got people like Terry Phillip that, he's the main curator at Reptile Gardens, one of the largest reptile collections in the entire world. And so if there's anybody that's fed a shitload of mice and rats to some stuff, you know what I mean? These guys feeding thousands of rodents and seeing the effects on a large collection of lots of different species. So these are people with some serious experience. And so I take that experience into account. And that's kind of where I got that logic from. And it makes sense. And, but there's a lot of people that are like scared of rats and all of that stuff. And man, and I think it causes prolapse and all. No. Some of you guys out there that got your 350 gram undersized adult female chondro that you're hoping to breed, man, just feed that thing a big fat weaned rat and you're going to be really pleased with what, give that thing a nice full belly on a big, robust prey item and watch it go from a subadult to an actual adult chondro and rise up into adulthood and look like a snake that could reproduce and be happy that you did.
So going back to breeding, I don't think we got much into cycling. Do you cycle at all as far as, light, heat, and food?
Yes, I cycle both. It's a little bit by eye, but basically I just start pairing stuff without cycling. I just start putting some stuff together, just seeing who's kind of interested in what, because I really believe that chondros are started in some cases far sooner than what we think, you know what I mean? And they cycle at some slightly different times. And the only way you can, unless you're going to ultrasound and stuff. And so I just kind of let the snakes, I read the snakes. It's like feeding. I was talking about by eye. I mean, so much of what I'm talking about is I'm just kind of becoming one with the snakes and watching them and learning and listening. And so I just stick them together and I see what's going on. And then some will start locking up and some won't. And then I start bringing the temps down slowly. And the ones that are locking up, I keep putting the pressure on them. Like I put the males in there a little more often. And I keep bringing those temps down. And then maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, I cut my lights down by 30 minutes. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, I cut them down another 30 minutes. And that's as far as I take it. So, and I also cut the heat duration down too. So I'm dropping the thermostat temp down for my nighttime low, but I'm also shortening the day length on light and heat, 30 minutes and then 30 more for about a total of 1 hour. And I've started that now. But I might throw stuff together in August and see what it does. I might not start cooling. Also, I'm in a new place, so I'm just like, can I get my room to start cooling yet? And I'm finding out that my room is taking a little bit longer to cool down. And so I've got my thermostat set to turn off, but my cages aren't cooling very much at night just because my room temp isn't dropping yet, because we just need to get a little cooler outside first. So I'm also kind of reading my room and stuff like that, and I'm kind of coming down in temp. So I've cut my lights down by 30 minutes so far, and I've got my thermostats dropped a few degrees, but now they're just going to have to drop on down the rest of the way with the room temp as it cools. And I'm starting to pulse the males in there a little bit, kind of tagging them in there a little bit, watching and pulling them out and that kind of thing.
Well,
And then
So
I kind of do what I call it bump breeding. I don't know if that's a good term or not, but I leave the
put
snakes
R.
in.
Kelly on.
Kind of, yeah. But chondros breed the best in the first few days after they're paired up. They just do.
yeah,
And
usually that's the case.
And
so,
especially in the successful breeding.
right. And so I put them together and I let them breed as long as they're going to breed. But when the male loses interest and slows down, there's not a whole lot of point in him being in there. So I pull them apart. And so, and then I would give them a few weeks and I put them together again. And the ones that they don't get any action, I keep cooling them and keep them coming down. And then the ones that are start to develop and I see some swelling, that male's going back in. And so it's a combination of getting sperm inside them and then stimulating them to kick them over the edge, to get them to tip over and to swell up and ovulate. And so once I start seeing them go, that's when I'll start putting that male in there a little more frequently and letting him push on her and keep her super stimulated until he loses interest. But if you'll think about it, like over the course of the breeding, they spend more time apart than they do together because I'm trying to keep stress levels down. I'm trying to keep my male using him. I could use him on more girls. I'm trying to keep her stress down. And I'm putting the pressure on where needed and when needed by eye and by feel.
And so then with your females, you transition them from bigger meals over 2 to 3 period to how you feed them during breeding.
I pretty much just feed them the same. They do. I try to tie in. I know people like the food cycle, and I think there is some merit to that. But I think what happens is because we've got the snakes paired up a lot during the breeding season, they just naturally get fed a little less often. And so you're kind of withholding food during the breeding season. There was like some kind of mixed up that people used to talk about food cycling back in the day, and they would talk about withholding food over the summer and then feeding them like hard in the winter time.
And I could personally never understand that.
I never understood that fasting for the 2 months of the summer thing. I was like, I don't get it.
Yeah, that's a misapplication of the logic. In the wet season where they're at, that's when there's an abundance of food. And a snake would never forego the opportunity to capitalize on those calories when it wouldn't go off food during when food's available. But if you think about it, then all of a sudden the weather cools down, it gets a little drier. They go through their dry period in the winter. Food becomes less abundant. Males, now in captive conditions, we've got males that don't go off food much anymore. They've kind of almost lost that natural instinct a lot of times. Right. But males go off food, And then there's a period of the reproductive process that the female goes off food. And it's a perfect, like having those things occur when food is less available makes sense. You know what I mean? And then the
Damn, I
babies are
hadn't. You know
born.
what? Something you just said. I hadn't even thought about how that could be bred out of the males, the being off them breeding season,
I don't even know if that's
captively.
my males. Just all my most of my males just feed right through the breeding season.
Nah, I'll say I got a wild caught. I got a wild caught
Yeah.
male that feeds through the breeding season, but but I get what you're saying about how that could be captively bred. You know, to the point where you got a male just going straight through the seasons. You know, as opposed to what it used to be.
Yeah, it seems like I hear less and less about males off food in the breeding season. But
Hmm.
anyway, then the female has the babies, and then the babies are born, and then they enter back into the wet season, which makes sense because now the babies are entering into a period of time when there's
Hmm.
lots of food available, which increases their chance of survival. And the female just came off of eggs. Remember, she's not getting them captive or artificially incubated. So she's been without food during the dry period, but she's now comes off those eggs and back into the wet season where food is available, where she's going to capitalize on all those opportunities and rebuild that weight. And so, really, in a captive situation, if you wanted to mimic that, you would feed them the year leading up to breeding heavy. You could even have them higher humidity, which makes sense. It'd be in the summertime, it'd be easy to accomplish. And then in the breeding season would be when things started to cool down, like our temp cycling, the days would become shorter, and then food would become more sparse. And
Okay.
so, and that would actually coincide more along the lines what they likely experience in the wild. And so, anyway, I don't necessarily do that, but it makes a lot of sense if you think about people would be. Remember, I was saying they put those extra meals in them leading up to
Yeah.
breeding,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, then they pair them together and they'd leave them together all breeding season long. People would just because they're scared to death that you miss the ovulation, so they just leave the male in there forever. And so those snakes didn't get fed a lot, and they didn't even realize it that they were food cycling their snakes. They were feeding them heavy leading up to breeding, and then leaving them paired up, and then not getting fed. And lo and behold, now they're temperature cycling, light cycling, and food cycling. And that was leading to clutches. That's my theory. So now you could
Yeah.
do it. It was accidentally happening, and now people are trying to purposefully do it. But I don't know. There's some movement got afoot where people were withholding food during the summertime, and it's a little funny. But whatever.
Yeah. So I got another question for you. As far as it goes with this process, I want to talk to you about incubation, but past incubation, um, you talked earlier about certain type of problems that could come from possible issues with incubation. But what is your overall success rate? Getting babies to get established, and what are some things that you do to get those babies established?
I've had some tough babies before. Sometimes it seems like it's almost male or female specific. Like
Uh,
some snakes just produce good feeders, and some snakes produce just some knucklehead snakes.
Hmm.
yeah,
And and there is some technique, but some snakes are just easy to get established. Like my female Mercury and my male Wrangler. Um, Mercury produces really good feeders, and Wrangler produces really good feeders. And when I bred them together, they produce really, really good feeders. And I mean, very little trouble to get those neonates to eat. And then I've also had some other clutches that there were some tough ones, but um, I guess I'm pretty good at getting them going. And so I'd say my success rate in getting I've had Neos not make it, of course, but I'd probably
yeah,
get 95% of them to survive or something, with some clutches being 100%, easily. Pretty much, if they come out of the egg and they're a healthy baby, I expect to get them to live. I've got full expectations that they're going to live. I'm going to crack the code somehow.
Do you find that
takes time?
Right. So given how many clutches you have had, do you find that your males are the ones that gave you harder time getting started? Like, have you ever had a female? Have you ever had an animal that grew up to eventually be female that was just an asshole to start at the beginning, or were all those males?
It's boys.
In some cases, I think you're probably right, but I don't know if there's any correlation there.
I'm just asking.
Well, sometimes
we talk about.
I'm starting to see some shit over here, John.
Sometimes it's the most extreme neos in a clutch, and sometimes those, because not only are we breeding them for funky looks as adults, these neos that we're seeing, they are not natural looking neonates. We're compounding the neonate appearance as well. That's why you're getting these super freak black neos, and there are neonate phenotypes that are enhanced and abnormal. And so, just like with other snakes, when you got these morphs and spider morphs and jaguar carpets, and I don't know, man, when you breed them, sometimes there may be a screw loose, you know what I mean? And they're
retired.
Yeah, I mean, they're just a little messed up. And sometimes, and that's why it's important to outcross, and that's why it's important to breed, for more than just looks. You want to breed robust, good feeders and have a really comprehensive breeding plan. But anyway, yeah, man. Sometimes it's the freak neos that are tough, and a lot of times those freak neos can be males. And so sometimes, I guess you're right. Sometimes the tough neos can be males.
What's the longest a baby has held out on you? How long did you go cis feed?
Well, I don't do it too much anymore.
Okay.
So you're talking like first clutch. Everyone has to torture themselves with like trying to be the savior. You know what I mean? Like just trying to save some knucklehead. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That's me.
And I mean, I've had snakes that I've broke down and like fed them anoles, like lizards.
Me too.
And it was crazy. We're talking about snakes that you could not get them to strike a pinky at all. And then you present an anole to them and they snatch it right up. And you're like, well, so there's absolutely nothing defective about the snake. And its ability to strike is there, its ability to eat. And you're like, so you're starting to try to like unlock what's wrong. You're like, you know what I mean? And so I've had snakes like that would, and then I've had some that didn't even eat the anole. You know what I mean? That wouldn't eat the lizard. We called those the lizard eaters. They're famous amongst my friends, the lizard eaters.
I had this weird theory one day, and I haven't said it out loud. While feeding babies, I was thinking about the same thing, and like how some babies just get started better on eating lizards. And I think that probably so few of these things actually survive in the wild that the ones that are eating lizards may just be naturally adept to survive better in the wild than the other ones. And I don't know how that works out. I don't think we'll ever know. I don't think I'll ever know. But there's definitely something about some of the animals that I've had that wanted to hold out for lizards. And once you give them a lizard, they're fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now some of those I was able to convert over. I wouldn't mess with it too much now. Nowadays, I mean, I'm really looking for the best feeders. I want to perpetuate the best feeding stuff I can for me and for the next generation,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, nowadays
So
I'm kind of no mercy, dude.
you just it's
You
like
know
you
what I
make
mean?
it, you make it.
I'm not saying I won't feed like some heads or some tails off of mice, or that some like a tough feeder,
Yeah.
but I'm not getting into this like you know shoving food down a snake's throat for 6 months, hoping that it's
No,
going
that's
to one day
ridiculous.
turn into a robust breeder that's
Yeah.
worth a damn. It just
Yeah.
it's just time to cut ties and move on.
I agree.
So throughout your, immaculate collection, do you have an overall phenotypical goal or desired designer line that you want to produce? Like, what is that you want to continue to produce as far as looks?
The blue shit.
Well, I definitely like the blue, and I like calico stuff, and I like combos of the two. The lines are really are there are they originate from the same place. Um, they kind of stem from the same um, spot. And so therefore they've been bred in two different directions, but they're really compatible with each other. And like
Yeah.
blue line calico crosses are great. So I'm interested in a little bit of everything. I want to continue I don't want to I like doing mashups, like, and breeding two things together and to create kind of funky, unique, one of a kind things. But I'll always keep a kind of a pure blue to blue project going because of I think it's almost just important to have them around.
You
Yeah,
also
that was
did
kind of one of my.
you also did a blue to blue pairing though, and you got that crazy ass animal that's he's still yellow.
Yeah, right.
But it
Yeah,
was
and
a
I'm gonna
red
use
Neo. It was the red Neo.
it was a red neo, and I'm gonna use her with a calico male. And I'll probably breed her to a blue male too,
Right.
over time.
Well, that was another one of my questions in terms of lineage growth. How do you view outcrossing and breeding lines, certain lines back to certain lines, or to just different lines in general?
So I like I really love the pedigrees. It's one of the parts I think is really cool about green tree pythons. And I think I think a lot of people that are starting out they're acquiring snakes and doing the best they can, and they're trying to ramp up to speed. But this may not be answering your question, but it's certainly along the lines of line breeding, and I think it's important. So what I'm trying to line breed is the blue blood, and what I'm trying to um, let's say we just again because the blue line is easy to talk about. What I'm trying to line breed is the blue blood, but what I'm not trying to line breed is the outcross blood because that. So, for example, and what happened is go back in time and Rico had the 05188 Blue Max Jarvis clutch, right? So that was a clutch of like 20 something, and it produced a handful of really nice blue males.
Mm-hmm.
And then those get into some hands, and and then 4 or 5 years later, those are the snakes on the scene producing clutches, and new keepers are snatching up. I'll take one of those. I'll take one of those. I'll take one of those. I'll take one of those, and then their idea is to breed those together. But now the Jarvis blood, if they breed that snake to that snake, then now the Jarvis blood isn't outcross anymore. Now the Jarvis blood is line bred, and it doesn't have the outcross impact that it used to have. That's not to say that you may want to make a calculated decision and breed the Jarvis to the Jarvis, as a way to perpetuate it in a large percentage moving forward. But ideally,
But you're probably gonna like sacrifice clutch size for that.
you might. But ideally, we'll just paint a picture that's easy to do. You might want to do something like like Mr. Blue Carolina to Bluebird Grasshopper, with Mr. Blue Carolina being the blue blood. That's like the fuel. That's where the blue's coming from. And then the Bluebird Grasshopper is the outcross blood for the most part. There was a little blue blood in Grasshopper, but Bluebird was an Aru. And so that's your diversity. And that's the representation from like Sky to the Godiva clutch, for example.
Yep.
The Mr. Blue Carolina to Bluebird Grasshopper. And then over here, you've got 05188 PNG or 05188 Blue Max Jarvis. So Jarvis is your outcross blood. You've got that PNG in there. Then you breed those together. And what they have in common is Mr. Blue Carolina. What they don't have in common is Jarvis and Blue Diamond and the PNG and Bluebird. And so you've got lots of diversity and no overlapping diversity. And then you're line breeding the blue blood within them. And so that is that dance that you're trying to do in a perfect world. And so I'm looking to create pedigrees where there's lots and lots and lots. And then even within the blue blood, you'd like to have diversity within your blue blood. Like you've got the Daddy Pants, Tim Moore's blue female stuff over here, and you've got your Mr. Blue Carolina blood over here. Or if you're going to have Mr. Blue Carolina blood on both sides, you try to have two different representatives from the clutch. You've got like Rico's Mr. Blue Carolina male over here, and you've got Mojo over here. Yeah. And so they're brothers, but they're not the same male just being head to head over and over and over. So you're trying to have diversity within the blue blood, within the line bred blood, and then as the few of overlapping outcross animals as you can, so that you don't reduce their diversity impact.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty dynamic strategy. Like as long as you can get another animal, you can sub one in if it has that correct blood.
Yeah.
What he just described was
that's dynamic right there.
That should have been done with the lemon tree stuff. Exactly what he just said.
Yes, it should have. Yeah. And so you've got animals like Christian Stewart bred Serac, which was crazy to Bluebird Grasshopper animal. And then he bred that to the Tommy Girl. And Lagertha and all that. And so that's all that. And in that, there's no Mr. Blue, there's no Carolina, there's no whatever. And so with Blue Deuce being off the Daddy Pants Tim Moore's blue female pairing, and Crazy being off the Daddy Pants Tim Moore's blue female pairing, they've got Mr. Blue's mom, they've got a bunch of blue blood in them, but they don't have that concentrated Mr. Blue blood and the Carolina blood and all of that. And so then that got bred in that direction. And then you've got like the stuff off of Sky and Rico's 0518 male and all that stuff. And then, if you're strategic, you're getting some of that stuff from these different branches of the blue line that utilized different blue line as well as different outcross blood, and then pairing that stuff together. And then that's when you're going to get excellent blue results as well as really robust results, as well as just pedigrees that are sophisticated.
But so y'all need to take this into consideration, what he just said. I'm going to clip that that was like the last 6 or 7 minutes.
Yeah.
What he just said, y'all need to take this into consideration. When you guys are buying animals that are being represented as blue, you see that what he just said is he didn't pull what did he say? 6 to 8 different names that originate from original blue lines. Like you can find it out there, but you got to know what you're looking for when you read these pedigrees.
Before we get into
I love how you just broke that down. That was just so.
And that's not to say that you can't. And I mean, I do some of it all, right? I mean, I've got a blue female down there I call Stella, and she's pretty tightly bred, but we made a calculated decision, and it was not our sole strategy, so I do some really tight stuff and
Yeah.
some really loose stuff with a plan to then take the tight stuff and breed it to the loose stuff later. And because I'm trying to not bottleneck.
John,
I'm trying to
you
not
gotta
get
watch that.
stuck.
You gotta watch that loose stuff, John.
Yeah. I'm a fan of both.
So before we get into the blue line discussion that I know Keno wants to, spearhead, I got one more question. How do you pick these dynamic holdbacks? Like, how do you pick them? Besides, which ones are eating really well.
Well, if I know the pairing is a really exceptional pairing, I'm going to hold back a lot from the clutch, and I'm just going to watch them change. So I'm looking for weird. If I'm not going to keep them all, I'm keeping weird looking neos, good feeders. When we could we lost the ability to DNA sex, but when we could, there are some pairings that I just know I only want to, like a really outcrossed pairing when I breed a blue male to a completely unrelated female, I may want females from that. And so if that's the case and I could DNA sex them, I'm just picking 3 or 4 of the best feeder girls out, sell the rest, raise them up, and then settle on the best looking of the girls I kept.
Yeah.
But if I can't DNA sex them, or if I want, in the case of blue snakes, oftentimes the males are the best looking.
I was just about to say you actually did that with males on a couple of clutches too. You was like, man, basically I want to keep the dopest looking male from this.
Right. And so if you're going to breed like a blue snake to a blue snake, then you want to increase your odds of not letting go of a super blue, then you'd keep every single male offspring until a yearling to make sure you could filter out that fluke super blue.
Because the males are
anyway,
usually the ones that turn to be super blue, right?
Yeah, they do most of the time.
Yeah.
So anyway, without the ability to DNA sex, if it was a clutch like that, and I thought that there was a chance for a super in there, I would just have to keep them all.
Okay. Now dealing with the tight,
all right, Keno.
Now dealing with the blue blood that's so tightly wound, what's the longest it's taking you for a blue line male to get up to breeding age?
Well, I mean, they certainly can take their time and breed at 6 or 7 years old, which is crushing. But I have a male right now downstairs. I call him, his name is Frostbite. He's a blue and black male. He's really exceptional. And he's 3.5 years old, and he locked up with a girl this season so far. So
wow.
He's locked up with her 3 times. And so I think it's more individual. At one point, I started to think that the really gnarly blue snakes took a while to turn on, but I'm starting to prove that wrong for myself.
Wow.
Mr. Blue bred at 3 years old. He was a 96, and he bred his mom in 99.
That was wild. That's
I think he was a pretty young 3-year-old too. Like he may have bred her at 2 and some change.
Like,
and the
here's
babies
your
were
mother.
born
Here's your
when he was
mother.
3.
I don't know. I understand, like, if you want to like land breeds and stuff, but I just can't see myself doing that.
Well, I mean, you got to imagine he was the only one at the time, so it made sense.
True. I know.
Yeah,
I get it.
And like Maxwell, when he got the computer chondro, his first pairing was he bred it to its sister.
Yeah.
And then he got Cal Jr., and then from there, he branched out a little bit.
Yeah. Cal Jr. is when he outcrossed. Yep. Yeah, you're right about that one. He got both of them from Trooper, he said.
Yeah. So when you're on ground floor of a line, you make crazier decisions.
So you
crazy is not the right word, but you make different decisions.
Nah, some of them look crazy. They a little far fetched. But look though, you do something that I do too, and you soak after ovulation.
I do.
Why do you do that?
I think that these snakes, when they get gravid, they really, they just kind of slip into this like slumber. You know what I mean? They're just kind of in this daze.
Get a little lazy.
And they're just a little hazy, man. And I just want to make sure that they're hydrated. So I give them a soak or two. Once maybe after ovulation and once after pre-lay shed, just so that I make sure they're going into that laying period is good to go, at least as I can control.
Well, what do you think? What do you think causes slugs, in your opinion?
I haven't had a lot of slugs. And so
damn, okay. All right, player. So I don't know what that shit is. You're gonna have to ask somebody else.
But I think a lot of it is people are keeping them too hot. I think improper timing. As far as introductions go, I think they're keeping them a little too hot. I think that, that they're just, that I think there has things to do with when they drop the temperatures. Now, again, I say all this stuff, and what I was hesitating there is there's just so many examples of people doing it all kinds of wacky ways and getting fertile clutches. And so,
and then like you too, because you had a situation where you said it was like one female that you just put a male with like once a month, right? You just do him in that once a month for the rest of his life, and you end up getting a clutch from that one.
Well, right. I think that was my female striptease. I couldn't figure her out, so I was like, well, I'm just gonna put the male in with her for a few days once a month until again, kind of like what I was saying, until I start seeing them breed her hard. And then I would put the pressure on her because I would have kind of like unlocked the timing and figured it out. And in fact, that she laid in April. She turned out to be a spring breeder, and I had been trying her in the fall, and I could never get her to go. So I just kept on going, and then she ended up going for me in the spring.
And then, how many years were you trying to breed her before she was able to successfully lay this egg?
Just like 1 or 2.
1 or 2, okay. Yeah. I asked that because I got a female that I've been trying to breed for like 3 straight years, and she won't breed. But she's a wild caught animal, so I don't know if she's older and kind of the club might be closed.
Bill's in here.
A wild caught snake could be still stuck in that rhythmic cycle that they had in the wild.
Bill?
The mayor came to see you, John Irby.
Okay. Yeah, Bill pulled up for you. Yeah, see what we're playing with the wild card. We don't know what that is, so I'm still trying. I guess I'm still stuck in that.
Well, they're in the southern hemisphere, so their winter would be opposite. So you may want to try her in the spring.
Okay. And like Irby, I didn't try her every season with like 3 different males, and with a proven male too.
You just breed your
with a proven male.
I thought you said you was going to turn her into a party prop. You're just going to take her to parties, just show her off.
Think so, bro. Just have to take her to the kids. Show off to the kids at my son's school.
Don't. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's all what Bill said over here.
I didn't try in every season. It won't work.
All right. Yeah, you're on the whole 365 year round.
She playing games, man.
Man, maybe she's just finicky, man.
So then, John, what prompted you to start putting your females in the rack system?
I keep them all in adult cages now.
No, I'm talking about when I'm talking about
When they lay.
Yeah.
It's just easy, man. I mean, I don't know if I started just doing it, but I also got further confirmation from Buddy Buscemi. Now, Buddy's wild, man. He puts his in a 6-quart, and that's a little tub. But he puts
What?
his females in.
How big are his females?
I don't. He puts his females in a 6-quart.
Females in a 6-quart tub. Damn. I only
shoves them in
like
there.
a 16.
But I've been using my big Cambros, but what I really want to use, what people use the Cambros for the yearlings, the little 12 by 18 by 9 inch. I think that's the perfect size for a lay tub. You just wouldn't want it to have belly heat in one spot, because she could lay right on that. So you'd want back heat or side heat or something. It's just easy, man. You just toss them in there. It's secure. It's heated. I mean,
and this is what, this like the last week before they lay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the key is catching the ovulation, and then you can time everything from there. If your temperatures are consistent.
So you do usually soak, ovulation, then last soak, and then rack?
Right in there. I just soak her and then put her right in.
Right.
And then she normally just lives in there a few days, leading up to laying. I used to put them in there with a towel, but I don't even really do that anymore because they just get under the towel and you can't see them. And I just learned that they just don't need it. And I know it sounds harsh, a lot of people, but if you think about it, like, I think so many things that the people are doing is because of our human instincts to be nice. So they do these setups where all this Spanish moss in the cage and
that's me with the moss.
Yeah, I like
all
the moss.
That stuff, and they provide a towel.
Nah, I know exactly what you're saying. The compassionate part. You're right.
The compassionate, yeah. And I'm just kind of over time. I'm just eyes on the prize. Right?
Giving them damn eggs, getting this damn.
We've made it this far. We've made it this far, and
sing that song.
And you know what I mean? And it's my job. I mean, she's already put all this effort into making the eggs. What I need to do is make sure this goes well. And I need to spot them, and I need to know when she's laying, and that way I can do my part so that we don't screw them up. And so, that's just me, eyes on the prize. No mercy.
Yeah. I got you.
Yeah.
So we wanted to get to at some point in time. I know Keno is big on this. He wanted to break down, the differences and misconceptions between blue snakes and blue line animals.
Yeah, sure.
Because Keno has deep knowledge of lineage with blue snakes that I don't have, but this rockhead dude does have it.
Why I got a rockhead, man? Why you nice?
You know why you got a rockhead? Because it's shaped like a rock, and you had a son, and his head is shaped like a rock. So you just a rockhead producer.
Wow.
Lord of the Rockheads, bro.
Yeah, Bill over here in the chat, he called me a savage. I mean, yeah, you got to kind of.
So what's up? Put some respect on that blue line. On this blue line. What's the blue line animal, John?
Well, so it's not a great name, right? First off, because back in the day there just wasn't multiple lines, and so it just kind of rose up as what people called and associated the Trooper Walsh blue line as. They called them blue line. Maybe they should have called them, I don't know, ocean blue or Arctic blue, like lemons or something, to give them a little more of a distinct name, because it sounds like just a descriptive term. It sounds like, any blue snake could be considered that. But those that have been around a long time understand the domestic blue line or Trooper Walsh blue line is a lineage of snakes that Trooper kind of got his name attached to it, but it really started with this guy Al Zulik, and then Trooper kind of built it and probably built it out as the furthest of anybody and kind of got his name stamped on it. And then Tim Morris then took Trooper Walsh animals and bred them together and produced Mr. Blue, which was kind of like that real founder, never seen before. We had never seen a snake
Mr.
that
Blue was like the first captain bred crazy one.
Yeah.
All before that, they was all out like wild caught blue or
Yeah, and then some people called it the Trooper Walsh Morris blue line, and that's not inaccurate. That's fine too. And then and then it just anyway. So it just got it. But I think in some ways, out of respect for Trooper and him being such a kind of a forefather of chondros, people just call it the Trooper Walsh blue line.
Yeah.
And so now there are lots of other snakes that have been brought about, one of which was Arctic Blue. He was a really bright blue, incredible import.
Yeah.
There was Vinsky, Prada, Manaquaris, all kinds of great snakes that are blue in coloration, but they're unrelated to the Trooper Walsh blue line.
Yeah.
They've been bred into it and used to incorporate. They make wonderful, compatible outcross animals that have been woven
and alone too. The product, especially the products, they make exceptional blue snakes alone. They just aren't Trooper Walsh blue line, the original blue lines.
Right, and they make exceptional blue line animals as well.
Yeah.
But there is something distinct and special about the Trooper Walsh stuff, because while these other snakes produce really nice blue snakes, there's this level of spark within the Trooper Walsh blue stuff when you get these super blues, and these other lines have not. Now, that's not to say they couldn't be refined over generations. You got to imagine. I mean, the Trooper Walsh stuff has had 50 years of refinement, and so, but the Trooper Walsh stuff is involved in every super blue that's been produced. There have been some people out there with locality stuff that have claimed that they got a super, but there's no comparison to the real super blues. There just really isn't. I mean, we're talking about there's not a blue wash. The real super blues don't have a blue wash over top of green, or like you don't have to take them outside for them to look blue. They are painted on, non-transparent, like non-see-through.
Yes.
Like blue, like the little news feed in the bottom of the screen.
And with super blues, one thing with us green tree python people do, we document colors. So if it's a super blue, just like you do, when you got them animals that go from like that pinkish color, they're like red to like pinkish to like straight to blue, them pictures are gonna be there. Like especially us green tree python people. You get a snake like that, I know you like, hey y'all, look, check this out. look at this scale right here on the nose. Well, and we love to document that shit. And it's like when you see somebody that pops up with locality animal, like, hey, yeah, this is super blue. But then there's no transition photos, that should ring a bell.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to take the crown, you know what I mean? In my opinion, even I love the calico stuff, but still, as far as a hobby accomplishment, producing a super blue is just the crown jewel of accomplishments.
Yeah.
And I don't want it if it ain't fair and square, right? I don't want it fake. So I'm not going to take the snake and go huddle by a bush outside in the deep shade and try to manipulate the photo. I want to take photos that are that honestly represent the
Representative of the
snake.
snake. Yep.
And I want to really produce one because I don't want it to be disputed. I want an undisputed, real deal super blue if I'm going to claim I have one.
No, that's real. That's real.
Straight up.
And, you know, and so
put down.
and so and anyone that produces a super blue, it's not questionable. You know what I mean? When it's in your collection, I've seen a couple of them do it, and when they're doing it, you're like, holy shit, I've got one on my hands here. And it can gain some blue and then pack on a ton of green and it all fall apart on you. But when it starts, you're going to start taking photos. Like, you might not post them online, but you're going to be showing your homeboys and being like, dude, check this snake out. Yep. So like the dildo, for example, or the snake I have, Stella, I've got pictures of those. And I'm going to wait till those snakes are like 4 or 5 years old. And I'm going to post like an album, or like from a hatchling all the way through, like 25 photos or something. Because again, you know, if you've got a snake that's doing it, you're taking lots of photos. Like, so no one's going to produce a super blue and then be like, forgot to take photos.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you at least
ain't no way in hell.
Ain't no way in hell. So you immediately kind of discredit your claim. So if you got a super blue in your hands, take a bunch of photos, or I'm gonna think you're a chump.
I think that the picture, you know,
lying, bamboozling, hoodwinking us.
Some of the angles, you know, I can understand. Like, you know, you can get certain looks from certain angles, but you know, if it looks blue in the cage, it's blue. If it looks black in the cage, it's black. So yeah, I understand that.
So John, a few years ago, you delved into the wild caught waters, and I saw you had got some animals from Ryan Burke. Shout out to Ryan Burke.
Yeah, shout out to Ryan.
Talk a little bit how your quarantine process was, and how those females acclimated to your surroundings.
Yeah, so I got 2 of them. I've got 2 of them left. One of them is with my buddy Christian Stewart up in Maryland.
Okay.
And we're going to breed it to his calico male velvet.
Nice.
And then one of them is with my buddy Brian Fisher out in Colorado, and he's doing Biak stuff with it. And he produced a clutch with it recently, and nice clutch of like 14 eggs. He only got a few of them to hatch, but got some pretty Biak babies, and the female, you know, hopefully will live on and thrive to produce another clutch. But she's been nice and robust and stuff like that. So when I got those snakes, you know, I sent off for fecal samples, and basically I just got fecal tests done on them, wormed them, made sure they were all cleaned up, and then also got Nido tests done on them to make sure they weren't Nido positive.
You keep like a separate facility or no?
No, I mean, I kept them in the same room, but they were in a rack by themselves.
Okay, cool. Okay. And then the Tarzan line. Tell me about how did y'all come across that male, and how tell me kind of like how what y'all plan on doing, like kind of like use him as the pioneer for like pure Biak pure Biak parents in the future.
Yeah, well, that's kind of why I sent the Biak to Brian. So I got Tarzan from Ryan Burke, and he was a really exceptional Biak male. I mean, just off the charts. And
I've never knew that. I didn't know that came from Ryan all these years.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember when I got him, but it was a long time ago. And I got him, and he was great. And but I knew that I wasn't going to breed him to some of my really high-end designer girls. I had blue plans with them, and that he needed to be bred with like Biak females. And basically, what I wanted was I was like, man, I wish I had Tarzan, but a girl version and a captive bred version, so that I could breed my nice designer males to them, as well as do Biak projects. So I sent him out to Brian, and then Brian bred him to a couple of girls and got some offspring. And that's how I have a Tarzan Biak female here. So I accomplished that goal, and I have a captive bred daughter of his here. And then Brian has got two females and a male from two different clutches. And so he's going to be able to do half siblings and breed them together and breed line bred Biaks off of Tarzan, and really probably be one of the first efforts toward line breeding a Biak that I can remember. I don't remember anybody ever putting any effort into trying to actually line breed a Biak for a certain phenotype. So it'll be interesting to see if when we do those half sibs together, do we get a bunch of freak Biaks, or do they just kind of come out average?
Yeah. What you bought? Tarzan was he an adult already when you got him?
No, he probably was like 200, 250 grams. Sub-adult.
Okay. All right, like sub-adult. All right.
He was off the charts when I got him. He gained some green over time, and he remained to be a high yellow. Really,
he was
really
but he was in like that orange-looking little sub-adult thing.
Yeah, and he was like,
okay.
It was very clear that the green that he was gaining was very contrasting. It didn't have like a faded edge. It was very distinct, and I had a feeling that he was going to be a very blotchy, high contrast, good looking Biak, and he was.
All right. How Air Force One doing?
He's good. I actually put him in with a Soul Train striptease female.
I know you got all the fans. You got all the fancy animals that you've been hatching, like blue chip and stuff. And I ain't seen Air Force One in a while.
Well, he took
but
a while
a few years
on.
a few years ago, he was like your main one. You was posting like, hey, this the future right here.
Yeah, well, he locked a female up for the first time this year.
Okay, all right, good shit. Right.
So I'm hoping I put him with a Soul Train striptease female and sibling to my male Showtime, and also a clutchmate sibling to the male Bill's been using, Freight Train.
Yeah, I saw Freight Train this weekend.
Oh, cool.
Banger.
Yeah, so a sibling female to him. I paired Air Force One up to her, and he locked her up. So that could be real badass.
So somebody wanted to get like
done.
Somebody wanted to get the most chance for a bluer snake from you. Which parents should they harass you about?
Well, so I've got a female off of the male Frosty, and Frosty was a clutchmate sibling to the male Jake, and Frosty was probably the bluest, most extreme super blue ever, arguably, and he produced one clutch. This was back in the day when we were still figuring out Nido virus and stuff. So who knows what took Frosty down? But anyway, we're lucky enough that we got one clutch. Christian did while he still had him, and I've got a female. So, and she's Nido free and healthy and a full adult. So one pairing would be when I breed my super blue male, the dildo, to her. That would be a really, really, really top shelf pairing with just historical, iconic, world class blood. Yep. And then the other one, the step above that would be when I bred the dildo to that blue female Stella that I was talking about earlier. And she's a super blue female. So she's as rare as they get. There's only been a handful ever produced. And then there's really only ever been maybe one other pairing successfully pulled off where a super, because you got to get one, then you got to get two, and then you got to get lucky enough then to somehow make it into the same collection
to be compatible,
and be within the same. So the stage is set that if I pull that off, and it'll be two supers. Christian produced the girl, and I produced the male, but the female was produced off a pairing we did together, and so I watched her go through her color change, and so I raised them both, watched them both change, fully documented color change, both Nido free, both robust animals. So breeding those together, that will be my max. That I won't be able to do anything more maxed out than that.
Wow.
So the dildo to Stella in 2 or 3 years will be a crowning achievement of blue line breeding for me. If I pull it
out
off.
the dildo.
I'm gonna be on that.
I'm
gonna be on that. Before we get up out of here, we only got a little bit of time left. Before we get up out of here, you touched on something. You brought up the Nido thing, and I want to ask from the MBF days to where we had little knowledge of it to now where we have rarely test and you can get the test within a week. How did you see let me ask this right. How drastic was the transition you saw from like the older heads losing animals and people selling off animals to right now? How far do you think that nidovirus knowledge has came from then to now? Because shit, a lot of times, man, when things just get a respiratory infection and die off.
Yeah, I think newer keepers are really in a great spot because they have the ability to get snakes that have been Nido tested, or at worst, Nido test them themselves and start quarantining and separating. And step one is trying your best to identify it, and then isolate it away from the others, and then and keep it isolated away. And so, I've put a lot of work into. Like I'm in my new house now and I've built out a new snake room and, everything in my room now has been tested. And so I've put a lot of work into not just providing Nido-free neonates, but also just not having to ever deal with it again. So for me, I've come a long way, but, when we first found out about it, most people had it in their collection. And you either had to make a drastic choice of killing everything off, or you had to try to breed your stuff and like extract as much value as you could out of it. Yeah. And that's kind of what I did was I bred my Nido positive stuff together.
You could have just act like you didn't know and then sold it and then just
could have. But again, I'm not in it for the short term.
Right.
I love chondros and I want to breed chondros for, decades more. And so I want a good reputation. And so I want to represent my stuff honestly. And I wanted to face all that stuff pretty squarely. So, I didn't really shy away from telling people that, I was breeding Nido positive stuff but the babies were clean. And so I was able to get a lot of that blood to the next generation while those adults were dying off and kind of got rid of those. And now, I'm left with that blood still around because of that work and that Nido now weeded out and stuff like that. And so it was
you told me
in the ass, but it was worth it.
You told me at Tinley 2019 that you had your hand on that shit already.
Yeah, I was.
You told me you was weeding it out then and what you were doing to separate it. Yep. I remember.
Yeah, there are a few keepers that are doing it, and I don't know what everybody's doing. I just know that I know myself, and I know what a few others are doing that are testing and weeding it out and getting rid of it, and they're just, they're not trying to test once and just claim I'm good to go. I mean,
Right.
it's the journey to get to a true Nido free stat may not ever be achieved. I don't know, but I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and I know some people are too. That are maybe they still got a thread of it in their collection because it's hard to detect sometimes, and it's not 100% accurate, but they're putting work to it. They're trying their damnedest to get it out of there and to find it. So, you can deal with people that are doing that, and they might not be perfect, but at least they're trying and they're investing heavily into providing you a safe animal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, John, you got anything else you want to get off?
No, man, I appreciate it. I hope we covered. If y'all, the real question is y'all got any questions we didn't cover?
Oh.
I went through all mine. I don't know. Keto might have some more.
No, John. I mean, man, John,
you explained a lot.
when we got people like you that like to talk and you come with it, you make it easier because we like to do is we like to shut up and give you the flow. You came with it, man. You dropped it all over. You spilled it all over the floor tonight.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure that people they're gonna take a lot of things from what they heard from you tonight and they're gonna apply it. I know I am.
Now we needed this though. We needed some straightening. We needed some straightening up in here.
Well, yeah, we talked a little bit about feeding and breeding and bloodlines, and so I guess we kind of hit it all.
Yeah,
we did.
John, man, it's been a pleasure having you on. You got anything?
Anybody out there that liked what I said? Love y'all. Anybody that got offended by the stuff I said, I love y'all too. Sorry about that. And anybody that thought I was directly pointing my finger at them, I wasn't. But at the same time, I just felt like, I should speak about broad issues that I think are important, and bloodlines and the market, and I'm not pointing my finger at anybody in particular, but I love chondro pythons and I love our community, and I just feel like it's my duty to try my best to help it keep going in the right direction and be healthy and fair and truthful and a good, healthy, safe place for new keepers to get good information and buy chondros from good people at fair prices and all that stuff. So that's just kind of my goal, is just speak the truth. And
Look, John,
I'm opinionated,
you don't gotta apologize for the truth.
Yeah,
because that wasn't your truth. That was the truth.
Yeah.
And then y'all out there, y'all got offended by the truth. Look, you got the shoe fit. The shoe fit.
And go give this man John Irby a follow at Mid-Atlantic Arboreals.
Yeah.
If you're looking for.
Come check out my Facebook page and my Instagram, Mid-Atlantic Arboreals. Follow it. I post a bunch of pictures and breeding updates, and that's where you can reach me and message me. And, if you're interested in animals I'm producing or anything like that.
And he cold. And John cold.
Well, this has been a good one, and we thank you so much, John. Please come back to see us again.
Yeah, man.
That's an OG right there. You see that? That's an MVF OG right there, veteran.
And the funny thing is, I was the young kid on the MVF, but all them old heads.
You was a young buck.
They didn't last. They weren't tough enough to stick around when the going got tough, I guess, or something, or they lost interest in chondros, or I don't know. But anyway, I'm here to stay. So
there's a few questions for you. Somebody is going to contact you about a private meter if they have one. And Ruben from out of H-Town, Texas says, do you have anything available? Ruben, handle your business off the show, Ruben. But thank you, John, for coming through. We're going to call it a night, and you take care.
Man.
And please come back and see us again, John.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate
Thank you
it.
for your time, John. We appreciate you.
Yeah, man.
All right.
Thank y'all so much.
Y'all have a good night.
Till
See ya.
next week, y'all. Oh, this was one of the ones, man.